Hello, welcome to Future Ready Live, where we talk about topics that will help CPAs, CGMAs, and their organizations prepare for change and transformation. I'm your host, Scott Kellam, Customer Success for CGMA Management Accounting at the AICPA CIMA, the largest global body of professional certified accountants in the world. Today, we're going to talk about a new kind of diversity, making the different generations on your team a competitive advantage. This is the title of the latest book by my guest, Dr. Tim Elmore. Tim is an author and leadership expert who has trained more than 500,000 leaders in hundreds of organizations worldwide. He's the founder and CEO of Growing Leaders, a nonprofit team that equips students and young professionals around the world to become life-giving leaders. His passion for leadership development began when he worked alongside and was mentored by the best-selling author John Maxwell. Hey, Tim, welcome.
Thank you, Scott. Great to be with you today.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us. And I did forget to mention that in addition to this book, you are the author of more than 35 books in your renowned career. So thank you so much for spending some time with us and our audience. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. This is a topic that we need to talk about. I'm finding almost every industry is finding, my gosh, we got 3 or 4 generations, maybe 5, and we're colliding instead of collaborating sometimes. And it's time we turn our frustration with each other into fascination. So that's my goal with the book. Yeah.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So we're just going to jump right into it. And so as far as in today's workplace, there are a number of working generations and which creates a potential discord between a lot. What this book is to help address that. What do you have to add to that and to expand on that?
Yeah, well, I really did want the book to be a resource that serves sort of as an encyclopedia, because there are perhaps 4, maybe 5 generations trying to work together. You've got Gen Z, the youngest team member coming in right out of college. They're in their 20s oftentimes, and they might just think very different than that Gen Xer or baby boomer that's running the ship. But here's what really drove me to write the book. Today, we talk a lot about diversity, don't we? There's ethnic diversity and gender diversity and income diversity. But I think this new kind of diversity is kind of like an elephant in the room. You know, we all know it's there, but we're not quite sure how to talk about it. And it's generational diversity. So I started finding over the last 5-6 years that if I'm interacting with a 20-something, it can feel a little bit like a cross-cultural interaction. If you and I got on a jet and flew to China, we'd get psyched up to work harder to connect with people there. Why? Because they're different customs, different values, maybe different language. Bingo. I think a 20-something has just a different set of customs and values. And I think there's something every one of us add to the mix. We just got to make sure that we are pulling out the very best from each generation. So that's my goal in the book. Yeah.
That's true. I have 3 children.
Okay.
2 are in their 20s. One is working now in cybersecurity, and I always, and maybe this is an approach or maybe it's an assumption of mine that I'm like, boy, if you guys can talk and walk and look me in the eyes, you're going to be so much more ahead. And maybe, I think like maybe I'm joking with my kids, but at the same time, I'm kind of not. So
no, you're exactly right. Can I interrupt? I'm so sorry. This is what I'm hearing from people that are perhaps over 40. I just want them to be able to have those interpersonal skills, you know, where you can look me in the eye and shake my hand and it's a firm handshake. So get this, a MarketWatch survey revealed that over half of respondents said, I'm unlikely to get along with someone from a different generation. Meaning wow. Before I even start, I'm probably not going to get along with those old folks or those young folks. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, we can do better than this. So that's my goal. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you talked about, I think you had mentioned or you alluded to flexibility.
Yes.
And you know, is that weakness? Is that smart leadership? What is? I mean, it can be considered both, but how would you glean that out?
Yeah. So I have a chapter called "How to Be Flexible Without Giving In," and I think both are important. So there's going to be new habits and attitudes in the freshly baked college graduates, but that doesn't mean they're bad. So I think we need to meet in the middle. So this chapter, I talk about know what your core is, what the non-negotiables are. And in those, you need to be stubborn. In fact, not everybody is going to fit. And you need to be able to show them the door and say, I'm so sorry, let me help you find another job. But I think in many areas, particularly guys like me this is the 44th year of my career. I've got to be so much more flexible than perhaps I want to be.
Right.
And maybe someone with a tattoo that I would not have had, I need to say, could you wear a long sleeve shirt instead of saying you'll never work here? Something like that. So in that chapter, I really talk about, I talk about Maggie and Antonio. So Maggie was a hiring manager. She interviewed Antonio. He seemed like a great team member, but the tattoo issue came up. He said, I'm fine. But about 3 weeks into his career at this place, he has this huge tattoo. Now, for some places, not a big deal, but for this particular franchise, Maggie said, why didn't you tell me during the interview he had a long sleeve shirt on? Well, they ended up just duking it out because Antonio said that tattoo is part of my identity. So that's very often what Gen Z would say. This is my identity here, the piercing, the tattoo, the way I wear my hair. You and I would go, seriously? No, your ID is inside of you, not outside. But Maggie beautifully navigated these troubled waters, ended up, both of them apologized in front of the entire team and said, he's going to wear a long sleeve shirt because we don't want to lose him, but we do want to make sure we're adhered to our core values. That's what I talk about in that chapter is how do we stay stubborn where we need to stay stubborn, the core, but how do we really learn to be flexible as we age and we keep getting older and older, and these young graduates are still the same age. So
right. I always ask anyone that has a couple things with tattoos. I want to know, did you design it yourself?
Yeah.
And what's the story behind it?
Yeah, that's right.
And what should my first one be?
Yeah, that's exactly. Well, did you know 1/3 of America has a tattoo now? So that's not just young people. That's a whole bunch of people all ages. Yeah.
It has to age well, though. That's my only requirement.
Yeah, that is true. That is very true.
And there was also there's a chapter, I think it was chapter 9, perhaps, or maybe chapter 10. It was regarding managing preferences, tensions, and expectations, which to me, that's huge. I mean, every one of these offers a possibility of conflict. And with conflict comes the opportunity for good things, right? Yeah. I think people might get exhausted by that, but how are they supposed to manage interpreting preferences, tensions, and expectations, and following along the line so they can move forward?
Yeah, great question. So in my mind, anyway, I feel like there are a couple of tensions, or not tensions, or a couple of conflicts that come up in every workplace, problems and tensions. Problems we need to solve. We need to get those things solved and move on. Tensions are probably always going to be with us, like the tension perhaps between sales and fulfillment. You know, they're always going to have a little tension because we just do 2 different jobs with 2 different values. But in that chapter, I try to make sure that if you're a hiring employer, you're finding out what are preferences. That's someone coming in that says, I wish this were true, but it doesn't have to be true. And then there's expectations. Those are things that I assume will be happening here at this workplace, but we ought to talk about them now because it'd be good if you're assuming this and I don't know it. But then on the longest or the harshest part of that spectrum is demands. More and more people, Scott, are coming in. And one of the reasons for quiet quitting and the great resignation is they come in with this demand. I want autonomy, or I want PTO unlimited, or I want this, or I want that. And I think it's so key, particularly for CPAs that are managing a team, to go, you know what, that's never going to happen here. So I just want to settle that now. So that chapter, I really try to help the reader sort out what is the difference between those preferences, those expectations, and those demands. Yeah.
And if we can improve those skills, what's the benefit, do you think, in the long run or short run?
Let me share a story that I think will illustrate. So there's benefits of getting this right, and there's liabilities for not. Early in the book, I tell the story of Tony, a different Tony, but Tony was working for a major retail brand paint store during his final year of college. And he loved his job and he started getting really creative. So he started a TikTok account during the same period that he was working at the paint store. And he started posting videos of him mixing paint and doing creative things like this on his TikTok account. Well, Tony's TikTok account went viral. By the time he had 1.8 million followers and 37 million views, he thought to himself, my gosh, I should share this with my employer. We could monetize this. This would be great. Yeah. So he puts a slide deck together to make a little presentation to the management. Tony does not get one executive interested in hearing from him, doesn't get one set of eyeballs to look at a slide deck. Tony did get something he didn't expect. He got fired.
Wow.
because those managers were just sure this young man was stealing the paint and doing this on company time and probably distracting to the customer. They had all this narrative about young people, kids today. Well, they let him go. So get this.
Wow.
Tony graduates, moves down to Florida, now has over 2 million followers, and he started his own paint store. So I always add the fact that I'm sure there's parts of the story we don't understand, but
Right.
I'm pretty sure that paint store missed a couple of million possible followers that they could market to because they weren't expecting that kind of help from a 21-year-old.
It's interesting because it's kind of a twist on something that there's a quote, beware of unearned wisdom, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And it's almost the reverse. That was like the reverse that happened. It was
so true.
They assumed that he came with nothing.
Yeah. So can I volley back with this?
Yeah.
Today, because we live in a different day. When I was starting my career, you listened to the old folks because they were the ones that had all the insight. Well, culture's rapidly changing right now, so fast that the young are sometimes picking it up quicker than the old. So I believe Chip Conley was right when he said every workplace has modern elders and young geniuses. Don't you love those terms?
Yeah.
Modern elders bring timeless insights from our experience. Younger geniuses bring timely intuition on where culture's going. So think of a workplace that can take advantage of the wisdom on the one side, but the intuition on the other. That's where I think we need to capitalize on the day that we live in. It's not like it was 40 years ago. And again, this book is simply saying we can do better.
That's the connection instead of the conflict part, I guess, right?
Yes, it's so true. Yeah. And I think that means we need to begin with belief. So one survey I didn't put in the book that might be helpful for your listeners here. When I asked respondents from all 5 generations that are at work, from the builders to the boomers to the Xers to the millennials to the Gen Z, I asked each person, what do you want most when you interact with another generation? Well, you can imagine we got lots of responses, but 3 of them came up in every single generation. Here they are. Number 1, humility. Every single generation from young to old said, would you approach me with humility? Which basically communicates, I've got more to learn.
Yeah.
Number 2 is respect. That means we begin with belief, not suspicion on that recent grad that doesn't know what he's talking about, And then the 3rd one, I love this one, curiosity. Would you approach me just curious about what value I might add to the team? So in our team, we've got 4 generations that work here at Growing Leaders, our team. And it's so fun for us to meet with each other. And I'm learning from Cam, who's 40 years younger than me. And I'm learning from Andrew, who's 30 years younger than me. But I have to go on with that hat on. I'm going to learn and teach. Yeah. So
do you think that's more of a unique approach for folks like us? I mean, is that,
yeah.
Because I approach that like every interaction should be good interaction.
Yes,
every action should be, what could I help somebody with and what can I learn from them?
Yeah.
Is that unique or?
Scott, I think you are unique. Unfortunately, I see so many that might be over 40 saying, it's that kids today, which by the way, we've been saying kids today since Socrates. Did you know that? He wrote in his, kids are disrespectful today to their parents. And I'm going, oh my gosh, that could have been written last week. But I tell you what part of the problem. I talk to HR executives that will say, we're meeting so many recent graduates that are just so unready for a career. Like you just mentioned, shake my hand, look me in the eye. One young man asked his new employer when spring break was. Yeah. She said, we work all year round here. I know it's weird, but we do.
Every Saturday?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly. It's more than 40 hours. But you see, that was so unknown territory. He knew the classroom, but not the workroom. Another young lady, Scott, took the job offer she'd just been given by an HR exec and actually said to her, thank you, but now my parents need to interview you to make sure you're a suitable boss for me. And of course, the person said, I'm so sorry, bye, we're done, So I think there's unknown quantities on both sides. It is a new day that we're in. Gen Z brings high agency, but high anxiety. They got a great sense of agency, like I've had a smartphone all my life, but high anxiety, the mental health issues are crazy in 20-something. So if we'll learn to navigate the new waters, I think we can thrive in our day rather than, just survive or maybe even collide instead of collaborate. Yeah.
That's interesting because I talk with a series of, I'm just friends with different types of coaches, different levels. And it used to be, and this goes to management too, right? You managed to win, right?
Yeah.
And you didn't have to worry about all those ancillary items. And nowadays it's like walking on eggshells.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, how should we navigate that? How should people navigate that with the anxiety?
I'll tell you what I've learned to do, Scott, and this may not work for everybody listening right now, but it sure worked for me. The phrase we've heard forever, this is the leg you got to stand on, So my acronym, ALEG, ALEG, informs how I approach a newer generation. So the letter A reminds me to ask questions. I'm so into telling that young employee what he needs to know. But if I begin with questions, they feel important. As cheesy as that sounds, they feel important because I'm actually asking them about themselves. The letter L, listen well. So I do a disservice if I ask questions and I don't really pay attention to the answers. So listen well. So get this, asking questions makes them feel important. Listening makes them feel heard. The letter E is empathize. So once I listen and they feel heard, if I empathize, they feel understood. And I just think it's so impactful for us to be, a 20-something, 30-something, where we're actually at our stage and age of career, listening and empathizing with, man, I bet that was a struggle when you were suffering from that anxiety attack or whatever.
Right.
And then the letter G is guide. I've earned my right to guide them now, which is what I wanted to do from the beginning. I've got some wisdom here, but I'm asking, listening, and empathizing. Now, if I'll take the time to do that, I win them at the heart level. You got to go slow to go fast. You got to go slow to go fast. So if we'll take that time and build that connection, that relationship, and I know it's financials, we got to get this work done. It's April 15th, but I'm telling you, if we'll do the relationship thing well, we're going to win them, and I think they'll stay.
Yeah. No, I met an executive years ago that was ahead of his time. I think, it was 91 in the banking world. And and from the outside looking in, now having talked with you, he had all those elements, and people flocked to want to work with him in his department. Yeah. And I don't know that he could have spoken as to why. It was just his approach.
Yes. Yeah. I love that. I think it's even more true today than it was 30 years ago. This is just me. I don't have any data, but I think Gen Z and millennials are longing to have some sort of personal connection outside the numbers, outside the X's and O's or whatever. And if we can offer that may mean building some emotional intelligence in the lives of us leaders who are listening here. And I talk a lot about building your EQ. Yeah. But if we'll do that go slow to go fast, I think it's a long-term play that pays off, in the long run.
So real quick, so you have these different generations. We're all in one. How do we get over how do we get by the stereotyping that we attach? Not that everyone does, but I mean, even in a joking way. I mean, how do you get around that, or how do you get through that?
Well, I think the first step, to be honest with you, is actually of being aware that we do stereotype. We hear one story about a Gen Zer and we go, they're all fragile snowflakes, or millennials are all narcissistic, every one of them, we need to stop that. So my goal in the book is not to stereotype, but to understand, to stereotype, but to understand. But I actually give some exercises in the book. One of them is something we've done here. We make sure that young and old are mixing together and asking about our superpowers. So I know that's a cheesy term, but everybody's got a superpower. Yep. And a lot of mine comes from, I am so cotton picking old today that I got stories from the 70s and 80s and 90s. But then they're going to bring some superpowers and how we can monetize that latest app, like Tony I mentioned earlier, or how we could do this, that, or the other. This is how to attract clients of my demographic. So Angela Ahrens, brilliant. She was the one that left Indiana to go to London, England, to take over Burberry coats, this high-end $2,500 trench coat, retailer. But the only people buying that coat back in 2006 were older women, that wanted that old trench coat. The millennials were not buying them. You know what Angela did when she showed up as CEO? She shook hands with the other executives, but then she immediately asked to bring together her youngest team members, 20-somethings, interns in college. And she said, what do we need to do to reach your generation? And she became not a teacher, but a learner there, just like we talked about earlier. And she wrote down ideas on the whiteboard. One of them was, you'll love this, the art of the trench. They said we should have a page on our website where we allow our customers to post pictures of themselves. We love to do that, don't we? In our trench coats. And sure enough, they had thousands just wheeling through. Of course, you go to the site because you want to see yourself, but then you're buying a coat. I think she tripled the size of that company because she was willing to ask, what are your superpowers? So she turned conventional wisdom on its ear. Think about it. Usually go in, meet with the executive team, all in their 40s and 50s. Then you tell the interns what to do. She met with the interns and said, what do you think we ought to do? We'll take it from here. We got the network, we got the budget. And so I guess I want to encourage people listening. Maybe we turn conventional wisdom on here once. Maybe we take them to lunch that are just from a different generation, and we find out what they have inside of them that can mentor us as in our life station.
That's great. Well, I think we're running close to time here, but is there anything, as we wrap things up, any final bit of advice or any question that you would have wanted to have been asked?
Yeah. Well, the last chapter of the book would be my advice.
Okay.
I talk actually about reverse mentoring. So reverse mentoring, I think, was a term coined way back in the 90s by Jack Welch. Remember Jack Welch, CEO of General Electric? Remember the 90s? So computers were kind of new in the workplace, and he had some old 50s and 60 somethings that just didn't want to get away from their pad of paper and their pen. They didn't want to use a computer. But he had some young MIT grads that were very adept in that new laptop or that computer. So he started reverse mentoring. You can imagine what it was. He'd match an old and a young, and they'd sit down together. They would swap stories. You always find something in common when you swap stories. But then the old would mentor the young, and here's how to succeed at this company. But then the young would mentor the old in, the technology that's been coming out lately or whatever. I think that may be as true today as it was then. So what if everyone listening could say, this next week, I'm going to jump into a reverse mentoring with somebody that's 25 years different than me and just learn and teach and learn and teach. It's revolutionized my relationships with the 4 generations we have here. So I would encourage listeners to try that out.
That sounds great. It's almost like you hopefully become like the favorite aunt or the favorite uncle. Right?
That's right. Exactly.
That's our relationship, right?
It's so true. And they're always a favorite at the family reunion.
Right.
So true. Yeah, that's awesome.
That's great. That's great. Well, hey, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And so as far as the big takeaways for me, that survey that's not mentioned here, approach people with humility, respect, and curiosity. And the A leg, I'm using that all the time from now on. So thank you. If you're okay with that. Ask. If you're going to ask, you have to listen. You just don't ask to ask.
That's right.
You have to listen. You have to empathize. Yep. And then at some point in the not too distant future from that, you are in the guide mode.
Yeah. And it's all earned through relationship, not a badge. Yeah.
And you have to be genuine. You can't just,
true.
It can't be a digital connection and that's it. It really does have to be, like you said, face to face and multi-generational.
Yeah.
So, okay. So if people want to get the book, I have the website. You tell me if I'm wrong. It's www.newkindofdiversitybook.com.
Yes.
And there's actually bonus content there too. And I'm going to do this. There's a free generational intelligence assessment.
Yes. Yeah. We call it the GQ. So, we did there. So it's a 41 question questionnaire where you can see, you're good with millennials, but not with Gen Z, or you're pretty good with Xers, but maybe not boomers. And it gives you a little report. So it's fun. And then of course you can get the book there too, but
that is so cool.
A fun free test. Yeah.
And can the rest, if I go in, can the rest of the team or do you charge for it above and beyond that? Or because I'm definitely going to check that out.
It's all free. Send as many people through it as you want to. We want to help.
That's great. That's great. And if they want to get in touch with you and your team, it's they can go to the website, timelmore.com for all about the training, the courses, and even more.
You got it.
Also, you're good with them to connect on LinkedIn at Timothy Elmore?
Absolutely. Yep.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I just want to thank everybody for joining me, and don't miss our other Future Ready live sessions. We'll be back here on LinkedIn the first and third Tuesday of each month at noon Eastern, and we'll see you then. Thank you.